Why? Why do they bother? Dragon Ball, Death Note, Cowboy Bebop, and so many more. What do these have in common? Bad Hollywood adaptations. Yes. Those live-action adaptations that just make you shake your head. Western live-action adaptations have an ongoing crappy track record that just have fans wondering why even bother. And honestly, it seems like Japanese directors are getting fed up as well. Yet, even with the ongoing stigma around them, Netflix keeps trying again and again. Let's be real. The only reason they're doing this is because it has pre-established fandoms that will give them subs just to watch it no matter how bad it is. And yes, Netflix's latest venture into this world is One Piece. The amazingly successful franchise that promises to be good this time, mainly because they have Eiichiro Oda on board. He's the executive producer and he's signing off on the project. But even still, Netflix had the cojones, the bravery to post his statements about the project. I say brave because it sort of paints an admittance to the struggles that they're facing, which I give him credit for. In the statement, he says, "I've been working with Tomorrow Studios and Netflix for quite some time now. Even though they understand each of the characters, we obviously come from very different cultures." There is the big problem that I think every single one of these live actions face. There's a cultural difference. And what works, why it's so successful, is this culture. And for some reason, they always want to make it this culture. It doesn't work. And that's like, that's my ongoing prime example of why these never ever work. And I'll get more into why I think some things do work later. He continues, "When it comes to entertainment, it could be frustrating from both sides. I felt like we're trying to get to the same place, so how come we're not on the same wavelength? There was even a time when I thought, is a foreign production even possible? In most cases, it isn't. And it's not a problem with the content, it's always a problem with who's putting it together, unfortunately." He continues, "Now, it might seem like this is coming out of nowhere, but we've been hard at work this entire time. And now, each and every entity involved is working in sync." I think you compromise. I don't know. Fans of Oda might actually have a better perspective of him and that he doesn't give up on this kind of stuff. But as we'll see in a little bit when we talk about Cowboy Bebop, in most cases, I think that a lot of them just kind of give up. They give up. They know they're just not going to win and they just give up. And that's not Oda's fault. Don't get me wrong. It's just, unfortunately, there's some powers you cannot push against. And that's why a lot of this stuff just doesn't work even when they're on board. He continues, "We're finally here. Considering my expected lifespan, I believe this is my last chance to bring One Piece to the entire world. If we're going to do it, I want to be able to supervise things while I'm still active. That's why I agreed to a live-action adaptation of One Piece back in 2016. Since then, Netflix has committed enormous resources to the production. It was announced that the show will launch in 2023, but they've promised that they won't launch until I'm satisfied." I hope that's true. That sounds incredibly reassuring, and I'm hoping that it's not a lie. It's like one of those, yeah, we're not going to launch until you're happy with it. At least until this date, because then at that point, we're going to lose money. We need to get this going. And yes, that makes sense. If they're planning on actually doing more seasons, they have to kind of get things out at a certain time so they can keep flowing money back into the project itself. Because from what I'm seeing, honestly, they are putting a lot of money into this. I mean, the stages and sets and everything they're setting up is, everything has to be fabricated, basically. This isn't like Death Note where all they gotta do is go to an abandoned classroom and film him having a freakout session. This is something that's requiring massive sets, and so I give them credit for that. But yeah, that's usually means a lot of money, and that means there's only so far they can hold this. But still, I'll give them credit if that's true. It is sort of reassuring. He continues, "The entire cast and crew spanning various countries are brimming with love for One Piece. They're burning with passion, and I reminded everyone involved that this should be fun." Again, I hope all that's true, Oda. But again, I do give them credit here for actually not allowing him to say this, but he said it and they printed it. Literally saying, we were just fighting at first. And I think from his perspective, they've gotten on the same wavelength. Now, granted, again, like I said earlier, is that him seeing they're on the same wavelength, or is he giving so that things kind of work out? Honestly, yes, a lot of people, including myself, is just fearful of something else being destroyed by Western companies. Cowboy Bebop was our latest example, and it was not good in a lot of cases. I mean, completely butchering the main villain character, which was absolutely woof, just woof. I don't think I covered it, but yes, technically back in January, we got a statement out of Shinichiro Watanabe, who of course directed Cowboy Bebop. He is the face of it, basically. Shinichiro Watanabe said in response to his thoughts on the live-action adaptation of Cowboy Bebop, they sent me a video to review and check. It started with the scene in the casino, which made it very tough for me to continue. Like, he got to there and he's like, what? What? I stopped there, and so I only saw that opening scene. It was clearly not Cowboy Bebop. And I realized at that point that if I wasn't involved, it would not be Cowboy Bebop. This is somebody that knew, just based on how it opened, this isn't it. It kind of gives you a sign of, no, there's not enough pre-established things here. We're jumping straight to the scene, and it doesn't give the feeling of Cowboy Bebop. This isn't Cowboy Bebop. He went on to say, I felt maybe I should have done this. Although, the value of the original anime is somehow far higher now. Woof! It's like, it's not Cowboy Bebop. Eek. Oh yeah, and by the way, now the anime is more significant. Eek. Twist the knife a little bit. Oof. But that wasn't the interesting part about this. Of course, that's the thumbnail. Like, you say that and that's what it gets all the clicks. But I think what's later stated is more significant, I think more telling to probably why he didn't get involved. It seems that his views on Hollywood deters him from even getting involved anymore. And it shines a huge spotlight on probably what's happening with Oda. He said back on the Animatrix, because he worked on an Animatrix episode, I first got to work with people in Hollywood. Working with those kind of people is always difficult. This is because at the beginning, they promised me I could do whatever I want, but that was just lip service. Actually, I had a big altercation with a Hollywood producer on the Animatrix. He would always come to me with stupid requests, just so that he could identify his own contribution. Yep, sounds like Hollywood, sounds like Hollywood. As the requests were stupid and made no sense, I rejected all of them. Unfortunately, I couldn't win in this situation, so I had to concede on some of these things. What did I say earlier about Oda? What did I say earlier about Oda? You just eventually have to concede. And that's why they don't like working with them. They can't do what they want to do. They can't make the thing that their creative mind wants to create. It's like they're creating this massive painting, and it's gorgeous. And they're getting about halfway, and then suddenly the director of the museum comes over and says, nah, you need to put a cow right here. It's like, then it's not going to be my painting. He went on to say, I learned from these bitter experiences though. For subsequent projects, I became smarter at handling people who wanted to interfere. In that, I would send back small corrections and adjustments just before the deadline. That tended to work. I love it. In Japan, you sometimes get producers that are similar to American ones. You also sometimes find good producers in America. So he's conceding that this isn't just an America thing, but I think there's such a cultural difference between Japan and America that it makes it a lot more difficult. There's much more contrasting opinions on what should be. Whereas a producer's hard to work with in Japan, but they're sort of on the same wavelength and they understand each other. It's just they're fighting with each other. Whereas in America, they don't fully understand each other. There's a language barrier and a culture barrier there that makes it a lot more contrasting. He went on to say the original producer on the Animatrix was a really good guy. He understood my work and didn't give me stupid requests. However, he had to leave due to family issues. But his successor, called Spencer Lum, was awful. Oof. Oof. He's exposing all right now. So many requests. Change this, change that. It was very frustrating. And if these requests were coming from the Wachowskis, I would have at least respected that, as they came up with The Matrix. So, who was this new producer compared to that? He explained that he was a gatekeeper to the Wachowskis, and unless he was convinced, he wouldn't bring any of my work to them. Again, they just have to get their hands in. They have to get their hands in. They're important. They're the one in charge. Now, granted, this is strictly his side of the story. It could be completely wrong, but still. So, when I went to Los Angeles for the recording sessions, I told the team that if I saw the producer, I would punch him in the face. I started to wonder if this was a real article or a real interview at this point. Like, what? The producer ended up not coming to the recordings, which is unheard of. I wonder why he didn't come to the recordings. For one of the other episodes by Peter Chung, I heard a story after we finished the Animatrix. Apparently, this producer had come up with more than 100 requests for Chung. Chung obviously got upset and said he would resign. The producer then freaked out, as he was meant to be responsible for finishing the whole production within the deadline and the budget. The result was that the producer conceded on all of the requests of Chung. When I had heard about this, I thought that he had cheated, but I learned from that as well. In short, if you work with a Hollywood producer, you have to fight. That's the key thing there. You have to fight because you just have to. It's unfortunate that that is really seemingly the case with all of these projects, is they have to fight. In a lot of cases, they don't know they have to fight, or they just don't want to fight. And that's why all this stuff fails so miserably. He concludes, otherwise, you will be unable to represent what you want to do. And again, this was the Animatrix. This was far before Cowboy Bebop. So you can understand why he didn't get involved. He just watched the first part of the first episode, and that's his whole involvement. And he just said, yep, not Cowboy Bebop. Later. It's so unfortunate. It's so crazy to think that somebody involved with this, director, scriptwriter, and everything, was involved in the original Cowboy Bebop. And it was produced by Hollywood as a live action, and he literally said, I don't want to watch it. Like, not even like I didn't like it, but I watched the whole thing because why not? No, he's literally just like, there's no point. Like, just turn it off. But this is all to say there's a main core problem here, and it's these companies not really giving creative freedom to the original creators, not getting their full input and making what it should be. They're making it what they think it should be. And that's the biggest problem, because a lot of these people don't even care about the source material. Again, in a lot of these cases, they're making it because they just want to get subs to Netflix. They want to bank on this pre-established fandom and pull them in. Don't care if it is good or not. But there is success stories. I mean, I think that, honestly, Battle Angel was okay. I enjoyed it. I didn't like the eyes. I think that just made it look weird, and I know that was intentional, but it just looked weird. Anime is anime, and it doesn't translate to real. The eyes don't translate to reality. That's why I always get like I cringe at those big masks that people put on that makes their head look like an anime character, and no. Or they use like filters, or they use tape to make their eyes bigger. It's just like, no, that doesn't translate to reality. Leave it in the art style. And honestly, I'm the type, I think my overall desire for live action adaptations by Hollywood is just to make their own thing. Don't name it the same, just make your own thing. That's what they did with Live, Die, Repeat, or Edge of Tomorrow, whatever the hell you want to call it. That was All You Need Is Kill. And they did good in the idea that, yes, it's not as good as the original manga or the original novel. It was not as good, but they made it its own thing, and it was entertaining. There was so much of the story that was not even the original, but they made it their own thing. And I think that's the case with what they should do with a lot of this stuff, like Sword Art Online, Yu Yu Hakusho, One Punch Man, My Hero Academia. Just don't make it anything like the original, and don't call it that. Just make your own thing based on it. But yes, I admit that's just me considering my only reference there is that Edge of Tomorrow was entertaining. But this is all to really kind of emphasize this idea of what the core problem is, and that is just not enough creative control from the original creators, the people that know best. And yes, from a culture that it works in and is why it's so successful. You can't pull out that culture and throw it away, because it's essentially what made it what it is. And the moment you try to make it your own thing and push your own thoughts into it, push your own culture into it, and rip out things that are maybe questionable or might be too silly, you lose what it was. And then there's the fact that, yes, technically turning anime or manga or whatever into live action in general, even for Japan, doesn't work, because the moment you take it away from an art style where that goofy and over-expressiveness works, it doesn't work with a human being's face. Which is like the biggest thing that I have a massive question mark for One Piece working, because they have some extremely expressive characters. And the moment I see one of those live action performers go like this, and then suddenly the CGI makes their mouth gape open, I'm going to shut it off. I'm going to be like Watanabe and be like, nope, not One Piece. Granted, I'm not a One Piece fan or anything. I haven't got into it yet. Not that I don't like it. It's just very daunting. But at least with this statement, it shows a a slight sign that there is some promise in the idea that he's at least pushing back. That's technically what made something like Cyberpunk Edge Runners work so well, even though that was technically a case of two different cultures clashing over the production of an anime. Trigger fought back, and CD Projekt Red did agree. And thus them working together in sync made an amazing show. And that's what all of these have to do, is they have to concede, and they have to agree and let creativity flow, not to butcher the original creativity. But anyways, I would love to hear what you guys think about this whole situation. Are you feeling promising about One Piece now with this statement out? Or are you like, no, this was unfortunately wrote by Netflix probably, or edited by Netflix just to make... Now, granted, they can't do that legally without getting in trouble, but still. They pressed him a little bit to change it a little bit so that made him look better, but I'd be wondering, for One Piece fans especially, are you guys actually excited for this? Are you concerned? Do you agree with what Oda said here and that this is going to be a good thing, or what? Anyhow, if you're new to this channel, make sure that subscribe button so you get all my content. I do news, reviews, first impressions, top list. If it's anime, it's pretty much here. Additionally, if you want to support the channel more, I have a Patreon link, a tips link, a super thanks button down below, as well as a membership button for YouTube. I greatly appreciate it, but it supports the channel. You guys mean so much to me, and y'all take care.